I think this is just the appetizer. And I think we're going to sort of, we're going to start on kind of the entree maybe this fall, hopefully. But I think that the amount of money is so big that, once we don't need anything new, we just need these existing players now to start going, okay, yeah, all right, let's, I'm an insurance company like Chubb, let me take in $5 billion worth of Bitcoin. You know what I mean? Not a crazy number, for a big insurance company.
In this recent video conversation with the Green Candle, Fred Krueger expresses a positive outlook on Bitcoin adoption. He sees Bitcoin as a growing asset class that's attracting institutional investors and sovereign wealth funds. At the time of this discussion, Bitcoin is around $60,000, with a 6% decrease in the last 24 hours and a 10% decrease in the last 7 days, with 19.72 million Bitcoins in circulation out of 21 million. Krueger acknowledges current economic uncertainties, but suggests that as adoption grows, Bitcoin's price will continue to follow the power law. Overall, Krueger seems bullish on Bitcoin's long-term prospects as it moves from 1% global adoption to potentially 10% and beyond. Before we dive into this discussion, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this channel. Now let's hear more from Fred Krueger.
To do. So, and in total, there's been $15 billion of net inflows right now. Right. So, but I'm just saying, like, one big insurance company could take several $billion, So we have the capability of these guys coming in. We also have the capability of sovereigns and wealth funds, right, to come in. And so I think all of this stuff, the big money has arrived, but the big money has arrived, but it's not sort of chomping at the bit quite yet. But it's there, and it now can chomp at the bit. So, when it happens, it could happen pretty quickly. I'm not saying it'll be very slow, but I wouldn't read too much into what's happening today or this week or this month. It sort of doesn't matter. I think what will interest me is if we can see some bigger names come up to the plate in terms of institutions, in terms of funds, and take bigger positions. Because I feel right now what everybody's done is they've taken the absolute minimum that they can to say that they have a position. Right. So 50% of all these hedge funds have invested in Bitcoin. Right. 50% of all hedge funds have some form of Bitcoin investment, but it's very small. Right. So they have 0.5% of Bitcoin, something like that. Now, they're just dipping their toe in the water. They're not even up to the ankles yet. They're just literally like, water feels good. But they're not in the pool. They're not jumping out. They're not telling their friends to jump in the pool. It's very early from their perspective. So from our perspective, we've been in this space for a while, and so we're like, hey, when are these guys jumping in? But from their perspective, it's new. And so everybody's got their own viewpoint on this space. And I think, but when it does happen, it could be explosive too. So I think, the thing you learn about being a Bitcoiner is you're in it you cannot predict when these moves will really happen. And especially now with this new money that's coming in, I don't think you can predict when this stuff's really going to happen. But I can tell you that I'm pretty convinced it's going to happen. Hedge funds is not the kind of money you want in this thing. Because by definition, hedge funds, they're only interested, they're going to buy it, they're going to flip it, okay? They're not buy and hold, okay? That's not who you want in this space, right? What you really want is long-term investors, right? And those are institutions, and those are rich people, and then people who manage money for rich people. That's who you want in this space, right? And so those people are not convinced at this point, right? They're not 100. They're watching it, but they're not racing for the exit. They're not exits of fiat, right? They're not stampeding it at all, right? So that's, I think, the best analogy, but they're getting comfortable with it. And it doesn't have to do much, it could go up 20% from here, and that would be in another 3 months or 4 months, and that would be enough that they could say, okay, yeah, I'm convinced now, right? It doesn't need to quadruple or anything like that for them to get it. They just needs a little bit more time, needs to break out to new highs, and they got to hear their buddies at their country club tell them that it's a great investment. That's it. You know, like, let's not forget that this country is owned by the top couple percent, right? That's who owns this country, right? So they're all going to the same country clubs. They're all their kids go to the same schools. They hang out at the same places, and so it just takes a little bit of time for them to socialize this stuff and to come to a conclusion that they need to be involved in this asset. They haven't had that amount of time yet.
As we just heard Fred discuss, industries like insurance companies, including Chubb, could significantly impact Bitcoin's price. This Bitcoin cycle is unique due to new institutional investors such as pension funds and insurance companies entering the market. These conservative investors represent a massive pool of potential capital, but will take time to get comfortable with Bitcoin. Once they do, adoption could accelerate rapidly, with institutional money potentially flowing into Bitcoin at levels much higher than in past cycles. Fred also shares case studies of potential investors. He's tried to orange pill, highlighting the challenges faced by even financially savvy individuals in understanding and accessing Bitcoin. Let's dive back into this discussion and hear Fred Krueger elaborate on Bitcoin adoption.
This cycle is very different. We have a completely new set of investors for this cycle as we have for the other cycles, right? So Matt Haugen from Bitwise made the comment in a space that I was in, and I retweeted it, that basically, if you look at kind of where money is in America, right? You have 20% is controlled by individual investors. 40% is controlled by people who manage money for other people, right? So it's managed money. And then 40% is like institutions like pension funds and, insurance companies, people like that, right? So are pension funds and insurance companies buying Bitcoin? Almost zero right now. Zero, right? Okay. And it's been way too difficult for them to do. Are people who manage money for other people buying Bitcoin? Very little right now, almost zero, right? So that's 80% of the market. How about individual investors? Well, now some of them are, right? And some of them could do that before, but they'd have to go establish a Coinbase account, which is, for you and me, it's not that difficult, but for a lot of people it is. They don't really want to do it. They don't trust something like Coinbase. They don't trust self-custody. So I think we're looking at maybe 10x the market as before. So it's a completely different market. It's a market that doesn't know anything about this asset for the most part. It's completely new, right? And they have now 6 months of being exposed to the asset. So, I don't think that it's exactly the same as these guys have been looking at it for years and years and years, and it's the balloon under the water that's just going to pop. I think they're discovering the asset for the very first time, and so I think that's it's a different thing. Now, it's going to take a little longer, but the amount of money is so much bigger, right? So all it's going to take is, you think Sailor's big? Well, there's hundreds of Sailors out there, in corporate America, right? And in managed money. There's hundreds of trillions of dollars that are sitting there, right? Trillions of dollars, right? Not billions. So there's so much money that I think this cycle and this market could be very different than all previous cycles. It could last much longer. It doesn't have to end in 4 years. It doesn't mean like we have 2 good years and then we're going to crash. It could be 6 years, it could be a long period, right? And it could behave somewhat differently, right? I'm very, very bullish, but I just think this is different. And I think it's it's a different group of people. It's more people who are, especially if you talk about institutions, right? They're not buying and selling. They're not panic selling. They're going to put something on their balance sheet. They're not going to look at it for another year or two. You know what I mean? They're not going to do much. It's going to be hard for them to put it on their balance sheet, right? But once they do, they're just going to leave it there. That's just what they do, right? So I think it's a lot stickier money that we're going to see, but I just don't think we've even seen the beginning of it yet. The most important thing, Brandon, is not like making it legal tender or anything. I think that's not so important. I think what's important is especially some of these very rich countries like Dubai, Qatar, Norway, right? Some of these very rich, energy rich countries who are just sitting on, enormous amounts of money, right? For them to say, we're going to start investing some of our national money into Bitcoin, that's really significant, and that really could happen. That could happen this year. I think it will happen this year. I think we are going to see Dubai or somebody like that, right, announce, yeah, we own, we own 100,000 Bitcoin. You know what I mean? Like, that would not surprise me at all, right?
As we conclude hearing Fred Krueger's views, he remains optimistic about Bitcoin's prospects as adoption grows and its potential to attract institutional investors. Krueger is particularly enthusiastic about Bitcoin's long-term trajectory as it follows the power law and moves towards greater global adoption. We would love to hear your thoughts. Do you agree with Krueger's assessment of Bitcoin's growing institutional adoption and its potential to follow the power law? How do you see Bitcoin's role evolving as it moves from 1% global adoption to potentially 10% and beyond? Thank you for tuning in to Only the Savvy. If you enjoyed this discussion, please subscribe, like, and share our video for more engaging content diving into the innovative world of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency.